And we are back. And right now we are about to tune into Dwayne Moody coming to us in Egypt.
At COP27.
Yes, at the COP27. And he is showing us an exclusive interview that he did with Minister Orlando Habet. We have that interview clip for you now.
All right, good morning, guys. We're here in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, for COP27. I am here and joined by the Minister for Climate Change, Sustainable Development, and Disaster Risk Management, Orlando Habet. Sir, welcome, welcome. Thank you for giving me this interview. And I guess we're in Egypt, right?
That's right, Glenn.
Sir, let's talk exactly COP27, what's been happening. We know that there's been negotiators from Belize on the ground from as early as last week, having meetings and solidifying Belize's position here at the COP as it relates to climate change, climate finance, and all of that. Let's talk, give us an update as to what's been happening.
Yes, certainly. This COP meeting, COP27, is very important for Belize, for the CARICOM region, of course, and we also participate as small island states with AOSIS leading some of the thematic areas that we do not only as a region with CARICOM and maybe even SICA, but on a larger scale with the Alliance of Small Island States. Very important. Continuing from where we left off in Glasgow with the Glasgow Pact, where we had to scale up mitigation, or at least asking the larger countries who are the bigger emitters to scale up their mitigation action, to scale up adaptation and the funding for adaptation, trying to make sure that what we asked for in Glasgow, trying to get a 50-50 allocation of climate finance for adaptation, similar to what was going to mitigation, and certainly that way we can build more resilience. This year also looking at the issues of transparency, where those were left off and how we move forward, and also where we had made some significant entries into Article 6 in regards to the carbon mechanisms, and where Belize stands in that area also to gain, or if there's an area where we can lose if we don't do the proper negotiations. Now, a lot of that doesn't largely depend on what we do, what we say as one country, but we are here to negotiate. But we also have some big players, and the issue with COP27 is that things happen by consensus. One new thing that came up for this COP and is the issue of loss and damage.
Yes.
Loss and damage was put forth, and we were happy now to find out that it has hit the agenda. So it is an agenda item for COP27. However, some of the issues that we want to address, especially in regards to finance, putting up a finance mechanism, there is going to be some discussion on that. We hope that a lot of it can be materialized, especially in regards to the mechanism itself, because it will not be finalized totally at COP27, but it can be finalized for the next year at COP28. We know that they don't want to discuss anything that has to do, even the sound of issues brought forth like reparation, and neither compensation. So we have to be able to see how we can structure it so that in the end we can still benefit from it. But Belizeans have to understand that the issue of loss and damage has two real components. One for quick onset events like a hurricane and what you do to get that type of assistance, which is basically humanitarian assistance that comes. But we are looking at those more long-term damages that occur over the years because of climate change, because of those emissions from those developed countries that have caused these problems. Coastal erosion, the rise in sea temperature, and how it affects our communities, because it affects our country, the physical infrastructure, but it also affects our people.
Yeah.
We see how we have issues of migration in Belize because of climate change, but also how infrastructure is damaged. Communities where we might not be able to rebuild in that particular community, but we might have to relocate them.
Yeah.
These are things that affect us. And so we are happy that hit the agenda, but we have to see how it goes from there. We need to see how we can establish markets for Belize. We know that we have reported that we have some potential sale for some carbon, especially carbon that was looked at from 2016, 2018, and maybe 2019, 2020.
Okay.
But we have to make sure that we get it registered, goes through the right mechanism, through the right platform, so that we can gain as much as possible. However, time is not on our side, because this is old evaluations, old mechanisms that we have to look at and then try to see how we can get some finance for it.
Those discussions are also happening at this time, right? In terms
Yes,
of that mechanism and registering and all of that, right?
Correct. A lot of that. Our technical staff is here doing that type of meetings and going into the negotiations. My understanding is that they have been there already, and they will be looking at somewhere along 28 to 30 hours of meetings and negotiations. So let's, we are hopeful that we can advance with that. But again, it is not only Belize, but it's the region, EOSIS that we are working with. But largely we are hopeful that maybe even more than what we accomplished in Glasgow can be accomplished in this COP27.
We know that in COP26 in Glasgow, it was all about saying, you know what, it's no more talk shop, we want action. This time around, we're seeing that, loss and damage is now on the agenda. We're also, we also know that food security and agriculture is also being discussed this time around. Let's talk about that in terms of, because I know that there are some countries within CARICOM that may not really be looking at food security as an issue or agriculture as an issue, because they do not really export, or they're dependent. And so let's talk about that, how that dynamic, and Belize being one of the forefront negotiators, how they ensure that, they keep that conversation there.
Certainly. For us, it is very important that we move away from those COPs where there's a lot of commitments, especially from these larger countries who make commitments, but then it is difficult to get anything from them because it is not binding, especially in terms of finance. Mm. So COP27, even though it's also termed the African COP, it is also termed the implementation COP. And we want to make sure that action is put into place, so that those commitments are action, and then we can move, for example, our commitments are through our NDCs. Mm-hmm. But for the NDCs to be effective, they also have to be implemented. For them to be implemented, we need funding. And so we have the NDC partnerships, and we have different areas where we can get funding through GCF, through GEF, and other areas, other financial institutions that can also help, but we have to put them into place. We have to make certain that we do a lot more in terms of adaptation, because since we are very small polluters and contributors to the larger global emission, but we are the receivers of the damages caused by climate change. So we have to hone in on the adaptation side, as well as what you mentioned with loss and damage. Agriculture is very important to us. Belize is still an agriculture producing country. Even though we have moved away a little bit in the last few years and have honed in a lot on tourism, which is very important, it has taken over the largest part of our GDP. Agriculture is so very important for exactly what you mentioned in terms of food security, but it also creates a lot of employment. It has...
And that was an exclusive interview with our journalist here at Channel 5, Dwayne Moody, with Minister Orlando Habet at COP27 at Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt.
The time difference, April,
yes.
is almost like 12 hours.
Yes.
So that interview would have taken place while we were while we were in bed this morning at around 1 a.m. But encouraging to note that loss and damage has been placed on the agenda because that's where a lot of the financing discussions will take place, and that's where Belize can submit its statistics and its data in terms of where we have been impacted, and then all these other developing nations in and around us, the Caribbean, small island developing nations, can also give their input in terms of the damages and the finances needed.
I mean, well, we were speaking to PM John Briceño this morning, and one of his notes was that we have to tap into the consciousness of these larger countries and these larger corporations that are in fact the mass producers of greenhouse gases and fossil fuels being thrown into our atmosphere. But there is last year COP26 was at Glasgow in Scotland, and this year it is in Egypt, and there is a symbolism as to why they placed it in Egypt, and it is because that particular area is one of the hot spots for climate change. Within that Mediterranean area, you're seeing a lot of extensive damage that is being taken place in the country due to climate change. And I think that particular strategy to have it in Egypt taps into exactly what PM John Briceño said, putting into the consciousness of those larger corporations that you are seeing for yourself the extensive damage that is being caused on this particular area due to climate change.
Well, April, with that, we'll take another short break.
Of course.
And when we come back, we have all that sweetness that we promised you earlier. So you don't want to miss it. Stay tuned.